It's crucial now more than ever that we consider diversity and equity in terms of college access and success. And so with that, I'd like to turn it back to Dr. Lawrence to do a quick introduction for Dr. Clayton and her team.
Thank you so much, Hannah. As previously stated, we've invited Dr. Taffye Clayton, who serves as Associate Provost and Vice President for Inclusion and Diversity at Auburn University. I promised her this morning that I would not do a long, extensive introduction, but she does serve as the Executive Administrator on the campus for coordinating the institution's diversity and inclusion strategy. There, she is the principal advocate and advisor to the president, the provost, and senior university leadership on issues surrounding diversity and inclusion. This morning, I would like you to take some time and welcome and put your focus on all of the great things that Dr. Clayton is going to present to us this morning about how we can make our campuses more inclusive, more diverse, and so that we are doing the job as we should do as higher education administrators by providing greater access to those who need higher education the most. Welcome, Dr. Clayton.
Thank you so much, Dr. Stevie Lawrence. Thank you for this invitation. And thank you, Hannah, for enlightening us with data insights regarding higher education and social mobility, with disproportionate post-secondary enrollment in for-profit institutions among Blacks and other minorities, and post-secondary degree attainment gaps across race and ethnicity, all very important enlightening data. Now let's review the outcomes for our learning time together. The outcome from today's experience should increase your understanding of key equity-related terms, understanding why evidence-based approaches and data disaggregation are so important, understand promising practices for gaining deeper insights into racial and ethnic-related equity gaps, and then understanding how to achieve impact with campus-based equity-minded practices. Keep these learning outcomes in the back of your mind, particularly number 4, as we will come back to it at the end of the presentation. There will be a quiz at the end of this presentation, the intent of which is to empower you in your DEI practice. And so allow me now to level set regarding some key equity related terminology. Most of you are likely already familiar with these commonly used terms in DEI. Diversity, individual differences, group and social differences, and really encapsulated in a short term, all the ways that human beings are different. You see a more elongated definition there on the screen. Equity, the creation of opportunities for the historically underserved to have equal access and participate in the educational programs designed to close achievement gaps in student success and completion. And then inclusion, the active, ongoing, intentional engagement with the curriculum, with co-curriculum, and in communities that allows for the increase in awareness, content knowledge, cognitive sophistication, and empathic understanding of the complex ways individuals interact within systems and institutions. And in some instances, we say the active, intentional, ongoing engagement that allows our institutions to reap the educational benefits of diversity. It's also about belonging and mattering. There are 4 components to inclusive excellence, which is a concept that is important in today's DEI lexicon. Inclusive excellence is about being a guiding principle for access, student success, and high quality learning. It is designed to help colleges and universities integrate DEI quality efforts into their missions and into institutional operations. And so it is an active process through which colleges and universities achieve excellence in learning, in teaching and student development, in institutional function and engagement in both our local and in global communities. And importantly, inclusive excellence is an alloy. It's an alloy that fuses together quality and diversity, right? To be excellent is to be diverse and is to be inclusive. So now let's talk a little about the term equity-mindedness. I want to focus on this term because it will serve as a grounding and a centering concept for today's presentation. Equity-mindedness. Now, equity-mindedness refers to the perspective or mode of thinking exhibited by practitioners, many of whom are on this call, who call attention to patterns of inequity in student outcomes. Prior to equity-focused discussions becoming front and center in DEI discourse, the terms equality and equity were often used interchangeably. However, given the elevation of equity-related discourse by researchers like Dr. Estella Ben-Simon, Dr. Sean Harper, Dr. Darrell G. Smith, and then comprehensive equity reporting by colleagues like the late Dr. Andrew Nichols of Ed Trust, Dr. Laurel Espinosa, formerly of the American Council on Education, who's now at Sloan Foundation, and the work of organizations like Achieving the Dream and the Gates and Lumina Foundations has really positioned our institutions to better understand the terminology, has equipped us with the tools and practices needed to identify inequities within our specific academic and broader environments, and has positioned us to address needs and gaps toward achieving inclusive excellence. So let's talk about this first visual. Equality is about having the same exact resources. Equity reflects resources distributed based on needs. Said slightly differently, equality and equity both promote fairness, but equality achieves this through treating everyone the same, regardless of need, while equity achieves this through treating people differently, dependent on need. For good reason, the focus on equity discussions over the last year has been focused on racial equity. Based on the great research of the Center for Urban Education at the University of Southern California, we know that equality imagines an equal world, while equity realizes that the world is not equal. For all the reasons that we see illustrated by the foundational scaffolding, providing some students with clear advantages. On this next slide, as we view equity through the lens of race, our focus should be on remediating systems, not students. We should redirect resources, strategy, and attention to pathways with the greatest need to fix barriers and provide intentional support. As a practice, we should regularly disaggregate the data. This is key. We should engage in goal setting and action planning. We should train faculty and staff to be equity facilitators, and then consistently ask questions to understand how our practices at our institutions may be impeding equity. In higher education, we also note that the equity lens can be applied more broadly across areas like household income, first in family to attend college, honors, IB, and AP courses, and even more encompassing to include gender, disability, and certainly many other areas. COVID-19 focused our attention on the fault lines of inequities that were exposed during the pandemic, and to some degree are still being exposed. Having led an American Council on Education DEI COVID-19 community of practice, we were aware that on campuses across the country, numerous equity issues played out. From digital deserts requiring that universities respond to the technology needs of students with laptops and Wi-Fi hotspots, to universities making housing and food accommodations available for our international students who were unable to return home when we sent students away from campus and pivoted to fully remote courses, or to undergraduate and graduate students with families who needed assistance from food pantries on campus to alleviate food insecurity, and to ensure that their households were fed. So while we are discussing equity today in a focused and specific manner around race in particular, and ethnicity, and some other groups that you'll hear about, first gen, et cetera, we understand that there is a broader scope to equity matters as well. So know that we certainly understand that. So equity-mindedness, as I referred to earlier, is a defining body of research in this work. And it has been developed by researcher Dr. Estela Ben-Simon, who is a University of Southern California professor at the Center of Urban Education. Ben-Simon has coined the term equity-mindedness, which describes a mindset comprised of several key points of knowledge and awareness. Equity-minded practitioners, as I mentioned, are evidence-based, they're race-conscious, they're institutionally focused, they're systemically aware, and they're equity advancing. Equity-minded warrants that faculty, administrators, and staff access and acknowledge that our practices may not be working. Understand inequities as a dysfunction of the various structures, the policies, and the practices that are within our own control. And we question assumptions, recognize harmful stereotypes that harm student success, and then we reassess our practices to create change. Ultimately, equity-minded institutions and leaders hold themselves accountable for the success of our students, seeing racial gaps as our personal and our institutional responsibilities. Of course, I promised a quiz at the end, and I wouldn't want to disappoint. It's not actually a quiz, but rather a relevant point of focus for a way to us to punctuate sort of the end of this slide presentation. As we focus on our equity-minded practice, Ben-Simon's equity-minded indicators are a well-curated list of questions to guide our practice. So I want us to read these indicators and reflect on them a bit, and then certainly think this would be a great way to inform some of the questioning in the time remaining. I'm going to just punctuate a few of these. Do we examine and report racial and ethnic participation in indicators that we monitor annually? So are we routinized in our approaches in looking at this? Do we have goals that are explicitly stated by race and ethnicity to improve retention and graduation and STEM participation? Do we recruit community college transfer students? You know, what about our community college transfer students and reporting? This is really about the theme throughout each of these indicators, whether it's on this slide about these pieces and admissions and acceptance and yield. The question is, how are we disaggregating the data? You know, a wonderful colleague and mentor of mine, Darrell G. Smith, likes to talk about and has researched this very issue. When we disaggregate the data, we gain insights regarding what is happening on our respective campuses. You know, it tells us things like who is succeeding, who is experiencing, right, the fruits of the mission of our institutions. So data disaggregation is key. Let's look at the next slide. We'll see the remaining questions, and it really just asks us, how invested and how engaged are we in ensuring that we create a culture of diversity, equity, inclusion, and yes, inclusive excellence and equity-mindedness. These indicators are a real guidepost and roadmap for how it is that we can do that more effectively.